into these interviews with a perspective about how you conduct yourself, both managing and being managed, how you conduct yourself in meetings, all these typical things, and really listen to the other person when they start to give you insights as to what they're thinking. You need to be consuming podcasts. I think that podcast is a really great way to consume this. You need to be consuming books and come to interviews with that macro view of work and strategy that can inform your answers to these questions.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leadership. Are you looking for a job? Or do you expect to be doing so sometime in the future? You're not alone. Studies show that fewer than 15% of Americans believe they have a great job and would not change it. And around 70% of all working-age people are actively looking for a job change. So much for employee engagement. If you're considering a job change, whatever you do, resist the temptation to flood the zone with applications. To stand out, you must be strategic in building your online brand, networking, interviewing, and negotiating. That's the counsel of Madeline Mann, my guest on this episode of Leadership. Madeline is a former HR recruiter. She has spun her insider knowledge of the hiring process into an award-winning career coaching empire called Self Made Millennial. Madeline's work has been featured by the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, ABC News, Harvard Business Review, and Forbes. Her YouTube channel has had more than 24 million views, and her other social media posts attract millions more. You should check them out. They are fun, they're engaging, they are highly informative. Madeline is also author of Reverse the Search, How to Turn Job Seeking into Job Shopping. Madeline, welcome to Leadership.
Thank you so much, Roger. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. Let me ask, why is it so difficult for some people to switch paradigms and tactics from being a job seeker to a job shopper?
The phrase that comes up in my head with this is your focus on trying to impress is hampering your success. And what that means is so many of us go into the job search process seeing there is this power dynamic between us and the company, and we're desperately trying to say the right things so that they'll like us. And we need to flip that on its head. We need to shift into a job shopper mindset, which can be challenging to do, where you are seeing yourself as an equal. You're already seeing yourself essentially as a coworker. And when you enter in with that kind of energy, that kind of curiosity, and that kind of discussion in the interview, suddenly the company starts to see you on a whole different playing field than everyone else.
I can see how that paradigm shift could make a difference. It's a mindset.
Exactly.
Now, you say most people conduct a job search like they've been handed a Rubik's Cube for the first time. What does that look like in terms of observable behaviors?
I know I have picked up a Rubik's Cube a time or two in my life, and I would, switch it around, try to get some colors to match on a certain side, but I have never gotten even close to solving one. And that's because I haven't taken the time to learn the strategy. Anyone can solve a Rubik's Cube. There's a specific strategy to it. And the issue is that job seekers is that they are taught these tactics in the job search that are outdated, that aren't helpful. And that tactic is apply online. And if they're not landing interviews, you know what their loved ones say? Apply more. It's a numbers game. And this ends up being a lot of productive procrastination where it feels good. It feels like they're doing something, but the results aren't there. And so if you approach the job search with a specific set of strategies, these job shopping strategies, you can actually land a job so much faster and know which twists of the Rubik's Cube actually lead to results.
I wonder why people haven't figured that out.
Because we're dealing with outdated advice. Things that actually worked before do not work anymore. I have a lot of clients who this is the first time they've job searched in 15 years. And one of the reasons they're struggling so much is because they think, but this worked before. And in this day and age, with so many online applications and the number of people applying online due to using AI to increase their output has dramatically increased. You need to now take other approaches to stand out.
Now, I've heard you say that even in an employer's market, job shoppers have leverage. Why is that? And how can they best use that leverage?
Well, so what's interesting, Roger, if you've talked to anyone who's on the job market right now, a lot of people have stories about how they went through an entire interview process, got to the end, and the company hired no one. Now, there's different reasons for why that would happen, but one of the major reasons is they didn't feel secure enough in any of the candidates. And anyone who's hired knows that it's better to hire slowly and take longer and wait for the right person than to pull the trigger on someone who is potentially the wrong match and is going to take all this energy to train and bring onto the team only for them to falter or even leave on their own. So if you look at that and see companies are terrified of hiring the wrong person, you can look at the opposite side and see that companies will move mountains to hire the right person. So imagine they're so afraid over here, and then you come in and you really reduce that risk for them. You speak to their pain points. You show that you have the right character, personality, and competencies to make this work. They're so afraid now to lose you because they say, oh my gosh, we've been searching for this perfect person. And so they will move timelines. They potentially might even increase their budget. They will do things to make sure you join the team. And job seekers don't realize that if the stakes are high, if you can be the right person, they will go above and beyond to impress you and get you on the team.
Well, for a job shopper, what thinking process do you suggest for defining the dream job to be pursued?
So the dream job, I have a process of determining what is your right next career step. And I'm telling you right now, Roger, no matter what age your listener is, anywhere from 20 to 80, there's so many people who don't know exactly what their next career move is, and a lot of people who are in the wrong career at all ages. And so I teach people about the wealth formula, and I help people to transition careers. I have a client who she's in her 60s right now, and she's transitioning careers very successfully. So there's 3 components of the wealth formula. The first is your strengths. People are often looking for roles that are fun. Well, guess what? The best way to find a fun role is not to look at your hobbies, but to look at what you are good at. How do you get into a flow state? What are those skills that you naturally are good at? And that's going to help you get promoted. That's going to help you succeed in interviews. So that's the first piece. What are your strengths? Make sure your next role, your next career move plays to those top 5 strengths. The second is your values. So what we need to focus on is, again, not, I really value golf, so I want to work in the golfing industry or something like that. No, it's what do you truly value? Is it that you value growth opportunities? You want to be learning so much. Maybe you're at a different chapter in your life and you really value flexibility of your hours. Whatever that is, get clear about your top 5 values, stay very strong to those, but then be flexible outside of that. And the final piece is market demand, because Roger, I am focused on getting people paid. And a lot of people don't choose their career based on getting paid when that is truly the reason we have jobs. So before you make your next career move, figure out how much do these jobs that I'm considering pay, both now and in the trajectory? And are these jobs increasing in demand or decreasing? Are the number of openings increasing year over year or decreasing? And that will help you to land an opportunity that pays you well and makes it so that your future job searches are significantly easier.
Yes, and of course, pay comes in different forms. It's not just the paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
It's the opportunity to work in an environment where your personal values are reinforced and your personal needs are satisfied.
Absolutely. There's so many different dynamics. I remember I passed up a role that was going to be $30,000 more because the job opportunity taught me something different and was actually also a lot lower stress role. And I got to bike to work every day, 15 minutes every day. I woke up and the first thing I did was breathe the fresh air. So all of those things I just named are worth to me more than $30,000.
Sure. Now, you emphasize your resume is not about you. Elaborate on that if you would, please.
We are taught that our resume needs to be basically this brag page of everything that we think is wonderful about ourselves. And it's good to self-describe as I'm seasoned, I'm creative, I'm innovative, all these things. And then just write down all of your best accomplishments. That's at least how I was taught. And so many people I know were taught that way. That is the wrong way to approach your resume. Really, your resume isn't about you. It is a sales page, not a Wikipedia page. It is where you are telling the company, here are the things that I can offer you that match what you were looking for. So your resume actually starts with the company and the opportunity, and you work backwards from that.
Again, that's one of those things that seems to make a world of sense, but there are a lot of people out there who haven't gotten that message. I can tell because I've seen their resumes, and you're right. I love the phrase you said, it's not a Wikipedia page.
Yes. Yes. And that's really how we've been taught is a lot of us have autobiography syndrome, where we, in our interviews and our resumes, we tend to tell our life story because we really are dynamic people with, an amazing quilt of experiences. But unfortunately, that approach gets interviewers lost in the sauce and they can't make sense of why you're actually the right fit for this specific role.
Right. Exactly. Now, you recommend what you call the show, don't tell strategy. What is that, and what role can it play in successfully matching a job candidate with a particular job?
So when we think about making a large purchase, with a car, we typically will test drive it first. Even with a bottle of wine, we get to taste it first before purchasing the whole thing. Well, it's very scary for companies to essentially purchase you with tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars without seeing you do the job yet. Now, of course, some companies implement tests and projects into their interview process, but what if you showed companies how you work before they actually hired you? Wouldn't that make you so much more convincing in the interview process? And so that is what a show don't tell is. It is where you are creating these work samples. And in my book, Reverse the Search, I go way more in depth about there's 3 different kinds of show don't tells and how to use them. But at a high level, it really is ways that you're either showing your work samples, you are building some custom project for the company. And now the interview is less about, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And instead, boom, let's actually look at actual work product that proves I am a great thinker and a great worker.
Well, it seems to me that another advantage of that, the show don't tell, is it gives the candidate the opportunity to observe more closely the culture and the work environment of the potential employer.
Yes.
So the employer is also showing and not telling. The interviewer can tell you a lot of things about the culture, but if you live in that culture a little bit, if you interact with people on some project, you're more likely to get a real feel for how things actually work in that organization.
And that's why I think viewing an interview as a conversation, and that's something I talk a lot about in Reverse the Search, of this consultative approach. You're right, because then it stops being this back and forth in the interview, and then you start collaborating as coworkers, and you're right, you start to see, does this interviewer actually know what they're talking about? Or could I see myself working with this person? And it's giving you a better view of the opportunity you're looking at.
If you leave the interview saying to yourself, I'll never get back that hour of my life, it's not a good fit.
It's probably not a good fit, no.
Now, Madeline, let's do some role playing. Let's pretend that I'm a manager at a company with a job opening that you're interested in. I'm going to ask you a number of questions that are commonly posed to job candidates. Then, if you would, please give us your advice on how to respond to such questions. Is that all right?
Okay. So I'm not necessarily answering the question. I'm more of giving how I should imagine someone should.
Exactly. You're going to coach our listeners on how to handle such a question.
Let's do it.
Okay, here's a common one. What are your strengths and weaknesses?
Okay, so for this one, for strengths, you always want to pick a strength that is one of the main strengths that are asked for in the job description. What the mistake too many people make is they choose what they think is their best strength. And if we're really trying to be persuasive here, maybe don't pick your best strength, pick your most relevant strength to the role you're going for. So pick that strength and then give an example of when you exhibited that strength. So maybe one of your top strengths, which is what they've really asked for a lot in the job description, is, building processes from the ground up. So you'd say, I'm great at building processes. For example, I built X process by doing XYZ, which led to ABC result. So you give those examples to really clarify it. The weakness, on the other hand, this is a sticky one.
Yes.
Okay. It can very easily backfire. So what's really important here is to genuinely choose something that is a weakness, because to pretend like you don't have any weaknesses is a little silly. So you should choose something real, but make sure it's not something that's core to the center of the role. So I come from a human resources background. If I was interviewing for a human resources role, I remember once I said in an interview when I was asked this, I said, honestly, one of my weaknesses is understanding sales and selling internally. I came from a company before where I would propose HR initiatives and they would just get immediately approved. And so I never had to build the muscle of internally selling and getting buy-in. And then I went to my next company and I had to hustle, and I got a lot of things actually rejected because I didn't really understand the skill set of selling and building influence in a business when you weren't already implicitly accepted in that way. And so I've started reading, To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink, blah, 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 right? So I start, and then you start saying how you're already trying to build towards that skill. Okay. So you're not saying that you fix the weakness, but you're saying what the weakness is and then how you're working on it.
Yes. All right. Another question. I think it's pretty common. Why are you interested in leaving your current job?
This one is hugely, hugely common. And my advice here is to make your answer as short as humanly possible, because you are not going to land the job because of this answer. We want to move along quickly so that we can get to questions where you're actually showing your expertise. So for this one, I have the 1-sentence challenge where ideally you just say one sentence and get it over with. If you were referred into this role, even if you networked your way into referral and it was very intentional, or you were sourced, so a recruiter found you and asked you to interview, I want you to say, I'm not looking for a role in particular. I mean, I really like my job, but when I saw this opportunity and I heard about it from my referral X person or from the recruiter Y person, I was so interested in it. I knew I'd kick myself if I didn't explore it. So that does something where it really shows that you are someone who really values your current opportunity. Now, if that's not the case and you've either already left your opportunity or there's other things. Again, always start with a positive. So I'd say something like, I love my current company. I would be there for another 10 years if I could, but we've gone through several rounds of layoffs. I see the writing on the wall. And so now I'm exploring more opportunities.
Right.
Because layoffs right now are so common. That's totally fine.
Sure.
But again, we're starting it from a place of hyper positivity versus saying anything bad about our employer.
Right. The last thing you should do is badmouth your current employer.
Correct.
That sends a bad signal. Mm-hmm. How about this question? Describe a time that you did something at work that was outside your role, but was a significant contribution.
This one is something that a lot of people don't prepare for, but it's a question that I ask in interviews, and I think it's a very good one because what they're testing for here is, are you someone who waits to be told what to do, or are you someone who sees opportunities? And so in Reverse the Search, I teach about this idea called a story toolbox, where it's this process of building out different accomplishments and examples from your career past that you can pull out in a moment's notice for interview questions. And this question would be a great opportunity to pull out something from that interview toolbox, that story toolbox. So what you'd want to do here is find any story, even if you don't feel exactly precisely of like, oh, that wasn't exactly outside of my role, but find a time where you proposed the idea. You said, hey, I think we should do this. And then you followed through on it. And so really look for those examples and then walk them through in a CAR formula. So talk about the challenge. I noticed this, then the action. So I did this, this, and this, and then the results. And the results were this.
I can see the value of keeping an inventory of those kinds of stories, whether you're going to be interviewing for a job or not, because that increases your sensitivity and receptiveness to opportunities to contribute in your current workplace.
Exactly. Yes.
Another question. Tell me about a workplace situation where you had to call upon your conflict resolution skills.
So this is one where when I talk about the story toolbox, I always say you need a one story where you have some sort of interpersonal conflict. And that one's huge. And so what's important here is I've seen people answer this in ways that reflects poorly on them of, oh, this person was tough to work with. And so I ended up just avoiding working with her. And if you told a story like that, gave an example like that, the question you always need to answer for yourself is, what character trait am I demonstrating in this example? Remember that answering an interview question is not the success in answering an interview question isn't answering the question exactly to what they ask. It's answering the question in a way where they now understand you at a deeper level. And so if I just say, I worked with someone and they were tough to work with, so I avoided them, I guess what I'm learning about you is you don't really solve problems and you're avoidant and all of that. So even if you can't find the exact example, try to find something that really shows a part of your character where you had to work with someone who was underperforming, and how did you help train them to get them better? Or, you disagreed with a coworker, and how did you work with that, right? So just make sure that you're finding something where you actually are showing character traits that would impress the hiring team.
Yes, and Madeline, as you respond to these questions with your very wise counsel, it occurs to me that if a person, as I think I said earlier, if a person is not going to be looking for a job at all, being prepared to answer these kinds of questions as a form of just personal introspection, it seems to me increases the value of that person in the workplace.
Absolutely.
Because they're constantly looking for ways to make a contribution.
Yes. And that is something I talk about in Reverse the Search in the final chapter about career security, is that once you get in a job shopping mindset, for the rest of your career, you now know what to look for in your job to make sure that these are actually accomplishments you talk in and your next interview, how to get promoted, how to start upskilling within your job to get that right next promotion or that right next opportunity elsewhere. When you are more present to this job shopper strategy, it's wild how it almost becomes second nature of how you are supercharging your career almost in the background of your mind.
Yes. Another question, which is probably pretty common. What is it about your current job that you like and that you don't like?
This one is also very common, and it is important information for the company to know, because what they're essentially doing, and a lot of people aren't as present to this, job shoppers are extremely present to this, is companies desperately want you to want the job that they were giving you. They super care that you feel that this is a compatible match. And a lot of job seekers think, well, no, I applied. I'm saying I'll do it. Like, why is there all this other falderall? It's because they want someone who will stay with them longer term. They will be internally motivated. And so when they're asking these questions about what did you like, what didn't you like, they're trying to see, how can we best manage you in this role? What are the things that are going to light you up? And is this going to be an opportunity that you are maybe not going to like as much? We just want to make sure this is a good mutual fit, because not every job is going to be a great fit for every person. And so when you're answering, what did you like about your previous job? You do want to be honest, though. In order to make this question the best use of both your and the interviewer's time, pick something that is very in line with the role you're going for next. So even if there's something about the role that you really, really love the most, but it's a very small part or no part at all in this role you're going for, that's not a good answer. Pick something that's in line with the role you're going for. And then as far as what you didn't like, be careful here, because if you say something that you didn't like, that's a big part of this role you're interviewing for, you are going to get out of being considered for this role. Now, of course, if that's a deal breaker, that's part of the role, then say it. Because again, if you don't want a role that's focused on that, it's good to be transparent about that. But in order to really make sure you don't trip yourself up here, the safest thing to do is pick something about your last role that was very relatably not enjoyable. I'll give you an example. So again, I come from the human resources profession. Maybe I could say something like, and honestly, Roger, my least favorite part of my last role was I had to run the termination process when there were underperformers, and I was good at it. And I had never had any issues with it, and employees were understanding, and it actually went quite smoothly. But, it's tough. It's tough to terminate someone. And I think anyone who's a human who's listening to that answer would say, yes,
right.
That does make sense, that would be possibly the least fun part of your job.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
So what about this one? What are 3 positive things your last boss would say about you?
So this one is one where, again, we can slip into autobiography syndrome, where we are talking about, well, what are the things that I really like about myself and all of that. I would move more into functionally things that are really important to the role you're interviewing for next. So before this interview, you have really prepared. You've looked at the job description, you've reviewed your notes potentially from the previous interviews with this company. You know what are the top skills that they're looking for. And so again, this is not about lying. This still needs to be accurate, but it's about, I'm sure your previous boss could say 10 things that you were great at. Okay, pick the top 3 that are most related to the opportunity you're going for. So if this next role focuses a lot on data, and I did use data in my previous role, I might say, well, one of the things that my boss would say is that I was very data driven. And the ways I was data driven were X, Y, and Z. And then the second thing is blah, 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 right? So just again, I think people think way too much about themselves and not enough about their audience when they're answering interview questions.
Yes, yes. Well, here's one. Tell me about a time that you disagreed with your boss on something that you regarded as important. How did you handle that situation?
Okay, so this one is similar to what we were talking about before with the conflict resolution of so many job seekers are going to focus on, okay, let me get an example when I disagreed with my boss, instead of focusing on, let me make sure I tell them an example that shows my character. So I can give an example of an answer I would say in this case. But I also want to encourage your listeners, if you get this question and you have never disagreed with your boss, which that might be the case, you can volunteer a different story. Not enough job seekers do this, where you can say something like, me and my boss, we actually haven't had a disagreement yet, but I did, we did have a goal that was set by the higher level of the company that I felt was in misalignment with our team's goals. And I can tell you that example. And you as an interviewer might say, perfect. Yes, that it's essentially getting to the same root of what I'm trying to figure out is, do you speak up for yourself? How do you speak up for yourself? Are you respectful? And so just remember that you don't get so stuck on answering the exact question. Focus on your character and focus on volunteering examples that will ultimately get to the end result that the company's looking for.
Somehow I'll get autobiographical here. It reminds me of a situation that I had years and years ago. I was head of global communication at Campbell Soup Company, and I was going up to see the CEO, and my boss was with me. And I was telling my boss that we needed to tell the CEO that this particular approach on this project was not going to work. It was a bad idea. We needed to change course. And my boss, who was, let's just say, lacking in courage to speak up on anything, said, "Oh, you can't say that to the CEO. There's no way you can say that." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Well, you just can't say that." And I said, "What's the worst possible thing that could happen?" He said, "Well, you could get fired." And I said, "No, that's not the worst possible thing. The worst possible thing is that I would work at a place where my opinion wasn't valued." And it just kind of blew him over. And I expressed my opinion respectfully and very clearly to the CEO, and things went just fine. I didn't get fired.
Roger, that is such a gem of a quote. Of the worst thing that could happen is my views not being heard. I love that. And it's so many people don't treat executives like people. And we're too afraid of them. And so I love that. That's such a good example.
Well, I just, said, I thought I was hired because my experience was valued. If it's not valued, I need to go somewhere else.
Yes. Hire smart people so that those smart people can tell you what to do, not.
Sure. Hope so.
Exactly.
All right. Another one. In one-on-one performance accountability meetings with your manager, what do you see as your responsibility in the conversation?
This is a good one because if I was asked this in an interview, I would ask a follow-up question because I'm not sure exactly what this question means. Is it one-on-one accountability? Is that kind of in the annual performance review, or is that a weekly check-in meeting? So that's a good reminder that in the interview, don't answer the question unless you fully understand it, so that you're not going off on a whole direction that's the wrong way. So I'll pose that to you. How would you like me to answer that? Which direction should I go in?
I would say both.
Okay.
One-on-one performance accountability meeting, which might be your annual performance review, and frankly, I think it ought to be more than annually. Or it could be a weekly, very brief catch up with your manager. What is your role in that conversation? Do you just sit and listen, or do you have a role to participate, report, suggest, recommend, etc.?
Yes. And you know what's interesting that just happened there is you, as the interviewer, just gave me a little bit of the answer.
I did.
And which that is not unusual. So that's another clue for your listeners, is when you ask follow-up questions, you will get an ear into, what does Roger actually want to see? What does he actually want to hear? And so, I could simply build off of that. And I would say that we need to be expert listeners when we're in an interview. Too often we are on the, let me deliver information. I'm telling you. In that moment, I was very sincerely listening. What does Roger care about? Why did he ask this question? He's obviously asking this for a reason, as someone who's managing people. And so always think about that. And so my answer would then echo some of those things of, I really see those meetings as essentially almost all my responsibility of talking about what I'm working on, talking about my roadblocks, because you have your own things going on, and really, co-creating my future together. So I would say, come to these interviews with a perspective about how you conduct yourself, both managing and being managed, how you conduct yourself in meetings, all these typical things, and really listen to the other person when they start to give you insights as to what they're thinking.
Yes. Now, every organization has a culture. What specific elements of a company culture is most important to you?
Now, this one, I could see a lot of job seekers really getting tripped up here, because it's a big, broad question. And this is where, especially if you are later in your career, definitely manager level and above, I'd expect you to have an ingrained idea of what your answer to this question is. Because really, if you're a manager level and above, you should be reading books on leadership, on company culture, on these types of things. And so don't be afraid to quote from those books or take from certain things. I remember reading Work Rules by Laszlo Bock about Google, and they talk a lot about experimentation. So let's say that was the most recent book I've read. So I might say, well, I really value a company culture where they take ideas, and it's not about saying yes or no to them, but it's about running an experiment and saying, we might get rid of this, we might keep this. And I think that that's a really important mentality, right? So you need to be consuming podcasts. I think that podcast is a really great way to consume this. You need to be consuming books, and come to interviews with that macro view of work and strategy that can inform your answers to these questions.
Yes. Another one. How would you describe your leadership style?
So you could take this question into all different directions, but if I was to prescribe a way to answer this, almost always, and you can disagree with me on this if you think so, but almost always the answer is, my leadership style is flexible. For example.
Okay.
And then I typically would give 2 examples of 2 different people who have reported to me who needed very different management. Because ultimately, and I made this mistake early in my career by defining my leadership style in a way that just felt actually incongruent to the way I lead. Ultimately, you should be leading people differently. If you are leading different members on your team, you should have a flexible style to that. But the key to that answer that actually makes it believable and compelling is to give those actual real world examples of working with those employees.
Yes. It's kind of like raising children. They
Exactly.
come from the same gene pool, but they have different personalities, different needs. Makes sense.
Exactly. Yes. You don't parent both kids or multiple kids exactly the same way.
And if a child says, I want to be treated the same, I would typically say, no, you don't.
Right.
You want to be treated for you. What's best for you?
Exactly.
When they got older, they understood that.
Yes. Yes.
Now, here's one. How do you see this role as part of your career trajectory?
So this is really important because it goes back to what we were saying before of companies care that you want this role. And too often we answer questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And this is kind of an offshoot of that question of how do you see this in your trajectory? Too often we will spill the beans about our future plans. We might say, well, this is preparing me because in the future, I'd love to start my own business. So this is helping me to learn about that.
Right.
Huge red flag.
Right.
Or, I like this because it's flexible because I'm looking to start a family in a few years. Again, like not to, like those biases happen. They are going to be like, ooh,
It's
can we
real.
really afford to have someone on paternity or maternity leave right now? Like we don't want to put those thoughts in their head. So I want you to fully focus on the actual job. So don't focus on future titles. Don't focus on anything else. So let's say you're going for a VP level role. So how does this role fit into your trajectory? Literally just start describing the role and why it feels really good. Of like, well, I've been director level for 8 years now. I've been essentially working at the VP level, but moving here into this role is going to really teach me new skills. I'm excited to be in this new industry and understand like your size of company, blah, 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 right? So you're just talking in depth about why this role feels really great, what you could see yourself achieving, what you could see yourself learning. In none of this am I saying, and then after the VP level, then I want to be in the C level, and then I want to go this. No, because they're hiring you for this role. So really only focus about the value of this role. And instead of talking about titles or future things you're going to do, talk about the achievements you want to do, which is the value you're going to add to the company. And then, of course, those achievements often result in promotions and increases and stuff like that. But that's the result. That's not the actual actions.
Sure. Now, Madeline, let's face it. Some job interviewers ask really off-the-wall questions. We've all heard them. If you could choose to be any animal, what would you be? Or, of all the superheroes in the movies, which one is most like you? What's your advice on fielding questions like that?
And interviewers do like to ask these, and they have, and pardon my French here, but like they have the dumbest reasons for why they ask these. And it'll be some like pseudo psychology of like, well, if they choose a mammal, then that means they're like this. And if they choose a reptile, it means like, it's like, oh my gosh, let's get back to the role. Okay.
Right.
But we do not bring in, a grumpy behavior here. We rock with it. I would never bring that energy into an interview. So what you do is, again, you've studied the job description, try to pick something, like when you go into an interview, anchor yourself in like the top 1 to 3 skills for the role. So whatever that is, maybe this role is about training. Okay. So then it's like, okay, what animal is really good at like training others or something like that? Oh, a mother lion. A mother lion will wound prey so that her baby lions can practice chasing after a prey that's slower. Oh, okay. Something like that, right? Where you always want to connect there, or, which superhero? Okay. Again, with training, like which one, blah, blah, right? So you just want to kind of always ground in like, what is the core skill, and then use that to think of what your answer would be. But to be honest, it's those questions are always so silly.
Well, I've never been asked such a question. I think I would just laugh. I'm sorry. That might not be the best response, but I think those questions are truly ridiculous. And it says a whole lot about the interviewer. But that's just me.
Yeah. A lot of interviewers are woefully undertrained on how to
Yes.
interview, even if they've been interviewing for decades.
For sure. I think I would figure out, anticipating questions like that, I think I would figure out a way to segue into something that was really relevant to the role.
I think that's a good approach.
Now, let me ask, professional speakers post highlight reels of their presentations on their websites, on YouTube, and elsewhere. In interview situations, what's your advice to job shoppers on how to play their career highlight reels?
When speakers put their highlight reels, it does a couple of things. It shows, okay, what does this person act like on stage? It gives the person who might hire them for a speech a bit of a taste, as well as it builds that credibility of, well, see, look at this person doing in front of this big audience. Look at these logos that are on the screen. And so you should take that principle into your career. So there's a few ways you can do it. It could be something like on your LinkedIn profile or on your professional portfolio where you are showing work samples. You are showing, accomplishments, those types of things that are highly relevant. I also recommend especially for career changers or people where their most recent job is not really in line with the role they're going for next, to create a highlight section at the top of your resume where it encapsulates those top key skills that the employer is looking for, as well as top key accomplishments. Because often, if this is a bit of a transition for us, those key accomplishments probably didn't happen in our most recent role. It could be from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We can pull up those accomplishments so that they can see, oh, this is extremely relevant. You have done this work before, but I wouldn't have seen that if you hadn't put it in your highlights. Otherwise, I would have had to go, digging around your resume, which almost no one ever does. And then finally, these highlights can show up in your interview answers. We talked before about the story toolbox, and you can integrate these highlights of what this company really needs to know about you into your tell me about yourself question, into the, your best accomplishment question, those types of things where you are prioritizing this information and making sure you're integrating it into your interviews.
And this goes back to the idea of your resume really needs to be tailored to the position. One size does not fit all.
Absolutely.
When someone decides to quit a job and move on to another opportunity, what's your advice on how to resign without burning any bridges?
I have seen too many people resign and essentially quit the job before the job is over. So they kind of let their job fizzle out and then they resign, and their last 2 weeks, it's tough to get a hold of them. They're not really wrapping things up properly. They're just checked out. And one thing we know about psychology is that there's the primacy effect and the recency bias. And that's really that we typically remember the first thing that happens and the last thing that happens. And so people might remember your first day coming in on the job, and they'll also remember your last few weeks. And so you really, even though you maybe did a lot of great work for the company over the years, that last impression is going to be impactful. And remember that everyone you work with could be a referral to a new job someday in the future. So don't burn those bridges. So a few things you can do is, even if it was a tough time, you're leaving, leave with a note of gratitude. Whatever you can be grateful for, be grateful for it. Thank them for whatever, actually you can thank them for. Second is, when you resign, have the conversation and then email later the official resignation. Don't email the resignation and then have the conversation. It leads to a stranger dynamic. You want everyone to know first, and then the official, hey, just to get this in writing, here's my letter of resignation.
Right.
Next, I would focus on ways to make your exit easier. A few ways to do that is take some time to document everything you've been working on so that you can easily pass that document along to someone. Second is to potentially put together a job description of someone who could replace your role. And third, is even referring a couple people into the role, possibly from your network, or just sourcing a few people who look like they would be a good selection for you, so that you're getting the ball rolling on your replacement if that's the right thing for this moment. They might not be replacing you. That also happens. But those actions really speak volumes about your character.
Sure. And what goes around comes around, as they say.
Seriously, I could still, from the top of my head, name people who left companies in really high character and high integrity ways. And that was, a decade ago or whatnot. So it really does stand out.
Sure. So what tips do you have for a job shopper who's being interviewed by phone or over Zoom? And that's more common today than it used to be.
I've been asking my audience of how do you get interviewed most often? And man, the number of phone and video interviews, it is surpassed in person, which I used to have all of my tips for interviews about being in-person interviews and just a couple, phone interviews here and there. You're right. It's so prevalent. And it's so important to know that, looking directly into the camera can make a difference as far as connecting with the person versus, a lot of us will kind of like look at the middle of our screen, which can make the connection less impactful. You can also, one thing that's really great about video and phone interviews is that you can look at your notes a lot easier. Now, I don't think you should feel bashful about looking at notes during an interview, no matter what, because as long as it's not scripts and it's more of like data, information, notes from previous interviews, that's fine. But I've seen people put notes up on the screen with like invisible, like a see-through stickies on the screen and stuff like that. So that's a really cool way for you to have like reminders about things you want to talk about in a way that's not disrupting the interview. And just remember that even if you're on a phone interview, you can hear a smile. Like, see, I'm smiling right now, and your listeners can probably hear it.
Yes.
So just remember that even if you can't be seen, your smile, your interest can be heard.
Excellent. All right. Finally, what question do you wish I had asked but didn't? And how would you respond? This is a question for you. This is not me being the job interviewer. This is for Madeline.
Yeah. I was thinking today about what's my favorite quote or what's my favorite, piece of advice. And my answer to that would be, there's this quote that lives rent-free in my head that is, the healthy man has 1,000 wishes and the sick man has one. And that is something I remind myself of every day, because I currently have my health, my husband has his health, and my kids have their health. And that is the most fortunate thing I could ever dream of. And so it always keeps me grounded of when things don't go my way or I'm frustrated. I just think I'm the luckiest person in the world. I can't sit here and have 1,000 wishes when the best wish I could ever dream of is granted. And so that's something I think about probably every day. And it's really helped me to have a good outlook on life.
Well, and no matter how tough things get for us, we don't have to look very far to find somebody who has it a lot worse than we do.
That is absolutely the truth.
Well, thank you so much, Madeline. Judging by this conversation, it's no wonder your straightforward advice wins plaudits of so many people in today's workplace. To learn more about Madeline and her work, go to madelinemann.com. That's Madeline Mann, MANN.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I share my exclusive conversations with top thought leaders who offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. My guests include superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Doug Conant, Dory Clark, Heather Younger, Marshall Goldsmith, Amy Edmondson, Bill George, Jessica Chin, Guy Kawasaki, Dana Perino, David Ulrich, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, folks, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. We appreciate those 5-star reviews, and if you leave a comment, it keeps those algorithms busy promoting our podcast across the world. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.